good morning, everyone. This morning, we're joined by two members of our faculty, Kathleen McNamara and Abraham Newman. Professor McNamara serves as Professor of Government and Foreign Service, and Professor Newman as Director of our Mortar Center for International Studies. Both serve in our Department of Government and our School of Foreign Service. Abe was co-author of the recent book of Privacy and Power, the Transatlantic Struggle over Freedom and Security. And Kate was the recipient of the 2018 Distinguished Scholar in International Political Economy Award from the International Studies Association. And they've recently launched some exciting work together, and I'm grateful to both of them for taking the time to share with us today. So first, can I ask each of you to just share a brief word about your background and the focus of your work over these years here at Georgetown?
Maybe I'll go ahead and jump right in. So I will first say that I'm actually a DC native, but I grew up on 4 different continents because my father was a diplomat, so we sort of came to and from DC. So I was absolutely thrilled to come to Georgetown 17 years ago. And to be a professor in the Department of Government and School of Foreign Service is really sort of, makes perfect sense in terms of sort of the way I was brought up. My research focuses primarily on the European Union, but I've also more recently started to work much more on the United States as well. And I'm interested in international political economy, the intersection of politics and markets.
Thank you. Nate?
Sure. So I'm originally from Columbus, Ohio. I was a Midwesterner by nature. And then I went to California for quite a few years where I did my undergrad and my PhD before coming to Georgetown in 2006. And it was really for me a dream job to join the Hilltop and be here in DC and also at this amazing institution. My research focuses on the way globalization is transforming international politics. And substantively, I've had an area of focus on digital technology. So data privacy, how personal information has become kind of a new resource for states and companies, and also global finance, and kind of how do we deal with these two areas where trade's no longer just about goods, but it's about these bits and bytes whizzing around the world, and what kind of politics ensues.
Thank you. Thank you. Could you both share with us the work of our Mortar Center for International Studies, Abe as its current director and Kate as someone formerly in that role, and reflect on some of the contributions of the Mortar Center over these past 15 years?
Well, I was so fortunate to take over directing the Mortar Center after the late Dean Carol Lancaster, who really sort of was so important in establishing Mortar early on. And I really worked to sort of consolidate a lot of her legacies, primarily to really make Mortar the place on campus for people to come together and think through the various intersecting way in which the global world works and interacts with politics, with economics, with climate, with all kinds of different things. I worked very hard on establishing intellectual communities. That was a really important part of the work that I did, bringing together people from across the campus in different disciplines and so on. And also I was very excited to establish something called the MURFs, the Mortar Undergraduate Research Fellows, which is a program where first-year students in the School of Foreign Service can start to work with professors as research assistants, and over their time at Georgetown actually start to generate their own research and become researchers and writers on their own. So I was really thrilled to do Mortar, but I was also very thrilled when Abe took it over.
So yeah, so this is my 4th year now of being the director of the Mortar Center. And as Kate mentioned, it really is the crown jewel of what we think of as promoting student and faculty research in the School of Foreign Service. That's its target mission. And in Mortar 1.0, it was creating these intellectual communities, providing collective goods for faculty to do book workshops and host speakers. And what I've tried to push it into in the Mortar 2.0 is to create its own intellectual agenda. So in addition to supporting these collective with goods is that Mortar could also have its own profile. And I think that, hopefully that's what Kate and I will talk about in a little bit, is one of these initiatives of saying, how can we bring faculty together in the School of Foreign Service to address kind of a pressing global problem that challenges the world?
Thank you. Thank you. Now, together, you've recently launched a new initiative in the Global Political Economy Project. Can you tell us a little bit about this work, and what are some of the areas of research that the project is focused on?
The thing we wanted to address is we were concerned that the intellectual community thinking about globalization had overly constrained the questions and theoretical problems it was addressing. It had been really driven by political economists that were focused on the core what we would call the neoliberal concerns. When do you get openness? Why are countries more free trade or less free trade? And that's a great agenda, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we felt like it was really forgetting about the larger ways that globalization is impacting people's lives. So whether that's climate change, digital technology, the way that economic statecraft is being transformed, that there's a whole range of questions, inequality, that really, they require urgent attention. And it's not just whether globalization is happening, like whether we're protectionist or not protectionist, but it's how is it, what consequences is it happening? And so that's the substantively, the major focus of this project is to re-engage political economy and say, let's open the aperture of what we're thinking about beyond just these questions of openness or closeness.
Great.
Yeah, just to add on to what Abe was saying, I mean, we really felt like there was a desperate need to reimagine the way we study these phenomena, that in fact, we as academics had really not done the job that we need to do for the world, right? To really dig into and understand the complexities of these interactions, the ways in which, in fact, globalization is doing these really fundamental transformative work. So to give an example, international political economy scholars had, again, focused lots on trade agreements and so on, but hadn't focused on things like growing inequality, and how growing inequality is not only an economic thing, right? But it's a social thing, that we have social stratification. We have people whose identities are very much formed by their experiences at the bottom of the economic scale and those communities that they live in, and all the different challenges and hardships they face, and of course the political repercussions of that, right? That's not only an economic situation, but it's one that actually creates tremendous polarization. So we really wanted to challenge ourselves and our colleagues, and it's been exciting to see how outside of Georgetown, we've gotten a lot of interest in this program. And we're really focusing on trying to generate a new scholarly infrastructure that also can be disseminated out into the world and hopefully inform broader public policy debates as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, as part of this work, you've launched a new series on race and the global political economy. What is the perspective that you hope this series brings, and what are some of the events that you have planned?
Yeah, so this is it's a year-long series. Right now we have 8 speakers. We had our first launch event last week, which was, I thought, fantastic. It was a conversation about race and trade politics. Next week, we're going to have another event on race and colonialism and the current political economy. And really, it's kind of crazy to think about the lack of conversation of race in the international political economy field, despite the fact that that industrialization was based on race and racist policies of slavery, colonialization, the entire, if you think about the cotton trade or any of these, global networks that we think about of what globalization was, modern political economy spends very little time thinking about the role that race plays. And so in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement and what's been going on in our country, Kate and I just thought we have to have a sustained and focused conversation on this. We can't let our field just say, oh yeah, that matters and let's move on. So the goal really is to bring in a series of very thoughtful and exciting scholars to lead a conversation. Kate and I, this is not our specialty. And so we're drawing on the expertise of others and highlighting kind of the range of diverse conversations that have maybe been overlooked in the field and trying to elevate them. And we think that it fits perfectly into this global political economy project that we've started. We are lucky enough to have financial support from the Open Society Foundation. They have a program on economic justice, and they've supported this, and so that helps us remunerate these speakers. I think we both believe very strongly that you can't ask a bunch of people to speak about diversity questions and then not support them and their research. And so a goal of this project is really to be part of what Kate was talking about, of creating this infrastructure of an intellectual community that expands, let's say, just the usual conversations.
Thank you. Thank you. And in addition, you've recently co-published a paper on COVID and globalization. How do you see the impacts of the global pandemic on our international system?
So the argument we make in the paper is actually that the global pandemic really just reveals more starkly all these different phenomena that we have been trying to call attention to in our work, in the work of GPEP. Things like the role of the environment, the kind of intense connections across the world that actually resulted in the pandemic happening in the first place, right? The various types of transportation and flows of people and so on and so forth, right? That actually speaks to the power of globalization, but the power of globalization to create global bads, right? Not just global goods. So we talk in the article about various different ways in which the pandemic is an opportunity to try to understand better the world that we live in today. One area that Abe works on is around the digital economy and digital technology. So maybe I'll let him talk a little bit about how the pandemic, again, calls our attention to these really important changes that have been going on.
Yes, I mean, I think, whether it's this conversation we're having right now, the pandemic didn't create this technology, but it has revealed how central digital technologies have become for all of us, that we rely on them. My children, they can't go to school without Google. Well, it's not something that political economists often study, Google. They're much more interested in thinking about the WTO, but really Google has replaced many of the central components of our trade regime because these platform companies and their reliance on data have become so central. Just to give you another example is, the supply chain breakdowns around PPE, that the fact that people they still can't really get N95 masks, that is a result of globalization. It's not a result of COVID. It's something that's been going on for a long time. Kate and I would say it's the triumph of efficiency over, resilience. And it's, realizing that we have to rededicate ourselves to these questions of these really banal and often highly technical things like how supply chains work, that we have to then rebalance resilience over efficiency. Because sometimes getting the cheapest product is not really going to guarantee that your society is sustainable. And so in this paper, we just argue that in a whole host of domains, globalization has had radical transformations on our lives, and we've unfortunately ignored them because there was the upside of getting cheap goods. But now we're seeing the risks, and we have to, I think both Kate and I believe strongly, we shouldn't throw globalization away, but we can't be naive. We have to then recognize these vulnerabilities and address them head on so that we can keep the benefits of globalization without having our whole society at risk from the potential downsides.
Yeah,
ultimately, I think it's really about thinking about how to make markets work for everyone and how to make markets work for the world in a way that is environmentally sustainable, is socially sustainable. And we have plenty of really good examples of how to go forward. Unfortunately, the United States has not always chosen those ways forward. So we're really hoping that our work and our broader program can start to provide the types of answers that we're going to need.
Well, we're very, very fortunate as a university to have the two of you as part of our community, and we're grateful for all of the contributions that you make every day to Georgetown. In closing, is there a last word you'd like to leave with the members of our community? Perhaps we'll go to Abe and then to Kate.
Well, I just think that, there's no place better to think through these problems than Georgetown. And, both Kate and I feel so lucky about the colleagues that we have here. And part of our project, GPEP, is to look interdisciplinarily across the schools to think about who can come together and have these conversations and try to address these, global challenges. And I think both of us feel so lucky to be here and have these amazing colleagues to work with.
Absolutely. We have really one of the very, very finest group of people who work on sort of global capitalism, literally in the world across the different disciplines. And I think the other thing that makes me very happy to be at Georgetown is the Jesuit emphasis on values. That, I think our work is very much inspired by a sense of moving towards a better world for everyone. And that's, we feel fits very comfortably within the values of Georgetown.
Thank you. Thank you both. Kate and Abe, we're so grateful to you for your leadership and for your contributions. And I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. I look forward to being with all of you again soon. Take care of yourselves and take care of everyone around you. For every Hoya, everywhere.